Good morning, interns, and welcome to our first intern workshop for 2026. There are a few house rules that are displayed on the screen. I just want us to go through them before we get into the business of the day. So there are a few things that you must take note of. The first one is that to ask questions, please use the Q&A function on Teams or the comment section if you are joining us on YouTube. And the session is 3 hours. Please stay with us until the end so that you can get all the information firsthand. And towards the end of the workshop, you will be required to complete a survey to confirm your attendance and rate the workshop. And then lastly, the presentation slides will be available on the website after the second workshop on 26 February 2026. Thank you so much. So that is what will be guiding us. And then now we will get into the business of the day. Okay, thank you. So this is the outline for our presentation. We will be looking at the competency standard, the portfolio of evidence, assessment, professionalism, confidentiality, and challenging competency standards. I'm sorry, I think I've opened the wrong presentation. I'm sorry for that. Right, I'm sorry for that. So once again, let me take this opportunity to welcome you all and also to congratulate you on successfully completing your BPharm degree. We are excited to have you as part of the pharmacy profession, and we warmly welcome you to the 2026 internship program. Please remember that this marks an important milestone in your professional journey, which will offer you the opportunity to translate your academic knowledge into your practical experience. So please make sure that you make full use of this opportunity because it only comes once. So I'm going to share the program for our presentation of our workshop today. So the welcome I've already done, and then there will be the introduction I've also done. Then the first part of the presentation is going to be done by myself, and then I'm also with assessor and moderator. So Dr. Rianda Hubert will follow me, and then after that we'll have a short break. And then Mr. Ibrahim Hussein will do the last part of the presentation. And there will be a question and answer session, which is about 15 minutes. And then after that, we will close the workshop. So this is the outline of my presentation. We will be looking at the legal framework, the pre-registration evaluation. We will also navigate the SAPC website, looking on the intern page. And then from there, we will look at some of the reasons which causes some delays in release of interns. And we will also look at the reassessment appeals and the consultation procedures that you must be aware of so that you can use them appropriately. We will also look at the unprofessional conduct. And then from there, we will look at the 2026 portfolio of evidence competency statistics. And we will also just guide you briefly on how to apply for community service. And you will also have the contact details for the office SAPC. So under the legal framework for pre-registration, this information is important, although some of you, the fact that you are here, you should be familiar with. Registration with council as an intern is essential before commencement of internship. And for you to be able to register as an intern, you need to have an approved premises, which could be a community, institutional, manufacturing, academia, or wholesale. And then you also need to have signed a contract with a registered tutor and paid the applicable fee for registration as an intern. Also, pharmacy graduates are required to undergo a minimum of 12 months practical training as interns. And this is also important. You can't complete your internship before you have satisfied the required number of days. So let's always bear that in mind. And then the scope of practice of a pharmacist intern. Please note that the scope of practice is the same as that of a pharmacist. We don't have a separate scope of practice of a pharmacist intern. The only difference is that for pharmacist interns, they are to work under the supervision of a tutor. So that is only the difference. You are not yet independent. You still require the guidance of the tutor when executing all those responsibilities. And interns in academic institution, manufacturing, and wholesale pharmacists are also required to complete 400 hours of supervised practice. And this will be done in an approved community or institutional pharmacy. And remember that when you're going for the 400 hours of supervised practice, your tutor is still responsible for your internship. Therefore, you need to make prior arrangements with your tutor and also with the facility where you will be going to do your 400 hours. And when you start with the 400 hours, please make sure that you should be there at least 5 days. 5 consecutive days. You can't go there 1 day this week, 2 days next week. A minimum of 5 consecutive days is what is required. And as you are busy with your 400 hours, please make sure that you keep records because that is important, and especially when you will be completing your portfolio of evidence. And then the supervising pharmacist is required to complete the declaration of completion of 400 hours as well as the progress reports online. So please make sure that when you go in there, you remind the supervising pharmacist to do that when you are done with your 400 hours. And then there is also what we call session of contract. So here, when an internship contract may be ceded to another approved tutor at the same pharmacy or in another approved pharmacy. So this is usually done for a number of reasons. You might find that the tutor, maybe your tutor is moving to another facility, or your tutor is not available can take you through your internship program any longer, or maybe the tutor is diseased. So there are a number of reasons that can lead to cessation of contract. So there are things that you must do in order to avoid delays on completion of your internship in relation to cessation of contract. So the first thing is that you need to make a submission of the online application, and then you need also to sign a new contract with the new tutor. And please make sure that if you're changing facilities, the facility that you are going to is also approved to train pharmacist interns. And there is also a fee that you need to pay. And then we are also encouraging you to submit your application to SAPC at least 7 days prior to the session date, just to avoid the delays or interruption of your internship. And then it's also important to note that session will be approved only once the new premises is approved and the prospective tutor is registered with the council. So those are the minimum requirements that you must make sure that you meet before you can submit your application for session of contract. And it is also important for interns to note that there is what we call removal of name from the register. So in terms of Section 11 of the regulations relating to registration of a person and maintenance of registers, the registrar may remove from the register of pharmacist intern the name of a pharmacist intern who does not meet the requirements that I'm going to outline or which are provided below. First of all, if a pharmacist intern has completed their internship to the satisfaction of council, they will be removed from the register of intern. And then if the pharmacist intern has not completed their internship to the satisfaction of council, so they will be removed as well. And then maybe they haven't passed the exams and they are not complying with other requirements. And if the pharmacist interns has discontinued their internship with the consent of council, so if the internship has been discontinued, then their names will be removed from the register. Or if they no longer complies with requirements and conditions of registration, as a pharmacist intern. For example, if you miss paying your annual fees, you will end up being removed, or if an intern is deceased. So a person whose name has been removed from the register will be notified thereof, and any registration certificate issued shall be deemed null and void. So during that period of removal. But at the same time, there is a process that you need to follow if you want your name to be restored into the register of council. So there is the restoration of name to the register, and that can be done by completing an application form for the restoration of the name to the register, and then provide acceptable documentary evidence that they comply with the conditions under which they may be registered as a pharmacist interns, and acceptable documentary evidence from a tutor to the effect that they have resumed their internship. So those are the requirements that you need to fulfill in order for your name to be registered into the register. To be restored into the register. And there is also a fee that needs to be paid, which is also provided there in your manual. It is a fee, or in the board notice, it's a fee of 2,822 rands. Okay, so now let's look at the pre-registration evaluation. So interns are evaluated on 4 components. First of all is the pre-registration examination, which is written on the online platform. And then secondly is the portfolio of evidence submitted on EPD online system. And then thirdly, the progress report submitted online by the tutor. And the last one is completion of 365 days of supervised practical training. So all this need to be complied with in order for you to meet the internship requirement and be released for community service. So here is just the slide is just providing details on online open book. Is an for the examination is an online open book examination, and it has 120 questions where each question counts 1 mark, and there is no negative marking. So the exam is made up of the general practice, which accounts for 70%, and the calculations, which accounts for 30%. And pass mark is 50% for the general questions and 60% for the calculations. And then when we look at the portfolio of evidence entries, so here interns are required to submit 6 portfolio of evidence entries, and there should be 1 competency standard per domain, and competency standard 5.3 is compulsory. Please take note of that. And then all your portfolio of evidence entries will be submitted for assessment, and then results will be released as per schedule published in the intern and tutor manual. And then results for entries submitted after submission deadline will be released on the next release date. So we urge you to familiarize yourself with the submission deadlines, and please make sure that you develop your own schedule with your tutors, so that by the time the council deadlines arrived, you would have done your part. Because if you can work with our deadlines, you will then not be able to submit on time. And then when the results are released, interns are also encouraged to resubmit all entries where they were found not yet successful, so that the assessors can be able to look at them. And when you're doing the resubmission, please make sure that you familiarize yourself with the assessor's comments, because that is what will guide you on what is it that you need to do. And then interns are considered competent when they are successful in all 6 entries. And then with regard to the progress reports, institutional and community pharmacy interns, they are to submit 7 progress reports. This should be done by their tutors. And then manufacturing, they are having 9 progress reports plus the declaration of 400 hours. This is the same to wholesale. And academia, they are having 3 progress reports and declaration of 400 hours. And they also need to have achieved their master's qualification in order to be released from the internship. And then lastly, proof of competency with the favorable reports from tutors is also required. All right, so here are the portfolio of evidence submission deadlines that I was referring to in the previous slides. So it's important for the interns to note that the last date for submission entry by interns, which is on the first column. And then if you look at the deadlines, you can see there are different colors that are used. So where you see a golden like color, it shows that that submission deadline is before the examination date that is provided in green. So for example, interns who want to sit for the 4th and 5th March 2026 examination dates, those that have submitted their entries on the 5th of January and they received their results on the 26th, and they have met the requirement to sit for the examination, will be able to book without any late booking penalties. But interns who want to sit for this exam and their results are only going to be released next week on the 16th of February, unfortunately, they are going to book under the late booking window, and then they will be expected to pay a late booking fee, which is provided there in your manual. So don't be surprised when you receive an invoice. And then, I just wanted to clarify the different colors, what they mean. And then also remember anything that is, for example, let's make use of the coming date of the 23rd February 2026, which is the date on which the intern is expected to submit. So following the submission of the intern, remember the intern must, the entry must be verified by the tutor first. Therefore, the tutor is only having only one day to verify, because on the 24th they must submit the entry. And if there are things that the tutor feels you need to correct and send the entry back to you, you are going to miss the submission deadline. That's why I'm saying please make sure that you do your things on time to cater for corrections in case the tutor wants to advise you on other areas where you can improve your submission. So once the tutor has verified, and the deadline is the 24th of February 2026, meaning every entry that has been submitted on the 23rd of February and verified by the 24th of February, the results will be released on the 23rd of March. So anything that was submitted up after the 23rd of February, unfortunately, the intern will receive the result on the 27th of April for that particular entry. So please take note of that when you plan for your year in terms of the portfolio of evidence. And then there are notes there that you need also to take into consideration. The first one, it says, according to council policy, appeal must be submitted within 1 calendar month. We're still going to talk about the appeals in our next slides. And then entries must be submitted by 12 o'clock p.m. on the last day of submission. Entries submitted after 12 on the last day of submission will be assessed in the next submission cycle. Please take note of that. We're saying 12 because during that time we will still be in the office, and interns who are experiencing some challenges, we will be available to assist them. But if you're submitting after 12, maybe at 7 p.m. and you're experiencing some challenges, you can't fault the office because you will be out of the approved time for submission. And then interns are advised to submit 6 portfolio of evidence entries within the first 6 months of their registration. So that is important because it's also a requirement for you to sit for the pre-registration examination. And then lastly, entries submitted after 13 November 2026 will only be assessed in January 2027. So remember, during the December month, our assessors and moderators will be on vacation. Therefore, they won't be available to assess entries during the December month. So if anything that is going to be submitted after the 30th of November will form part of the January cycle, and the results will be released on the 22nd of January in 2027. And then interns should also note that submission of the 10th and subsequent portfolio of evidence, there will be a fee that will be charged. It's a fee of 327, and this fee is also published in the council website. So please try to do your best to avoid having to incur extra charges for submission of your CPD or portfolio of evidence entries. And then we will also be hosting the feedback workshops. The workshops are scheduled for the 28th of May and the 24th of June, but you will be notified in case there are changes. And the purpose of the feedback workshop is to respond to interns' portfolio of evidence queries, to share the portfolio of evidence assessment experience. This will be done by the assessors and moderators, and also they will guide interns on how to improve the quality of their portfolio of evidence entries. And the deadline for portfolio of evidence submission to qualify for exam, I've touched on that when I was talking to the schedule for portfolio of evidence submission. So please look at the schedule, and these are just the dates for the exams, which are also populated in the schedule. And what is important for you to note here is that these days are subject to change, and you are therefore encouraged to keep on checking on our website. And it's also important for interns to note that all exam bookings must be done online before the closing date. The dates for bookings, I think they will be communicated to you. A late booking fee will be charged after the closing date until 14 days before the exam. So please take note of that as you're planning your year. And then the exam entrance requirements. So interns who are in their 6 months of internship, here we're talking of interns who have registered maybe this year, for example. They are required, for them to be able to sit for the exams, they are required to submit at least 6 portfolio of evidence entries online and be successful in at least 3 entries. They should have completed the practice exam, and they should have submitted 3 progress reports, which is done by the tutors. And yeah, if you can just make sure that all those requirements are met, then you'll be able to sit for the exams. And interns in their 9th month or more must have submitted and be successful in all 6 portfolio of evidence entries, completed the practice exam, and the tutors must have submitted 4 progress reports, depending on the sector of or the category of pharmacy where they are doing their internship. And lastly, interns who reattempt the exam for the second time or subsequent must be successful in all 6 portfolio of evidence entries, and tutors must have submitted the relevant progress report according to the intern's date of registration. And interns should note that there are no exam fees for the first and the second attempt, but a fee will be charged on the third and subsequent exam attempt. And again, the tutor will have access to intern overall results. So the tutor will know how you performed. Okay, and then now we are done with the exam requirements. Let's look at the SAPC website. We're going to navigate the intern page. And then here, that's the pharmcouncil.co.za. That is the address you will use to access our website. Then when you are there, please select registered person. After selecting registered person, select pharmacist intern, and then you will land on this page. So when you are on this page, when you click manual, you will be able to access the 2026 intern manual. Alternatively, you can access the manual here by clicking on where is written click here. So there are 2 areas where you can access the manual. And then there are also the intern CPD system. There is also a user manual that is provided there to assist you navigate the system easier. So when you click here, you will be able to access the manual. And then when you are on this page, there are other important documents that are provided. There is the Good Pharmacy Practice Manual, SA Guide to GMP, and then there are standard treatment guidelines. There is a national drug policy for South Africa. So those you can access from the website. And then when you want to go to your secure site, you're going to click here where it's written login, and then that will take you to the secure site wherein you will put your login details. And then for you to access the CPD page, you're going to click here where it's written CPD. And then after clicking the CPD, the system will request you, if you're logging in for the first time, it will request you to do your annual declaration. So all you need to do is to click go to annual declaration. And then once you are on the annual declaration page, there are three components of the declaration that you will be expected to answer. There will be three questionnaires. The first questionnaire will be on the employment, the second questionnaire will be on the domain competencies, and the last questionnaire will be on the assessment criteria. So when you are on this page under the employment, you will be able to access the scope of practice of a pharmacist. Just click there if you want to check the scope of practice before you complete your annual declaration. And then from there, you go into complete the questionnaire. When you're done, you just click continue. It will take you to the next page, which will be the domain competencies. So when you're doing responding to the questionnaire under the domain competencies, you will be requested to select those competency standards that are applicable to you based on the sector or the category of pharmacy where you are practicing. So you please make sure that you indicate whether you do this, you don't do this, or you never do it, you do it seldom, and that is important. If you can say, I do not do this for all the questions, then according to us, you are not practicing because you have to do one or two of the competency standard under the 6 domains. So if you're saying you don't do any of those, then the system will designate you as non-practicing. And then it means you are not an intern because you can't be a non-practicing intern. All the interns are practicing. But if you indicate that you do some of the competency standards in the domains from the 6 domains, then the system will say, according to your the competencies, you are a practicing pharmacist. If you agree, then you will click the green tab there to say I agree. Then you are done with your annual declaration. It will show there that you did declare for that particular year. And then, this is what we will also be able to see from the office. And then once you have done your annual declaration, you will be able to access the Intern CPD platform. So when you are on this platform, you will be able to see under my submission, you'll be able to see all the portfolio of evidence entries you have submitted. The CPD cycle is just guide you on the 4-step cycle that you will be following when you're submitting your portfolio of evidence entries. And the domains and competencies, here you can always refer to the domain and competencies when you are completing your portfolio of evidence. And then under archive for interns, there is nothing because you don't have a portfolio of evidence entries from the previous years. So when you do your submission, when you click on reflection, it will allow you to put your description of your reflection, and then when you're done, you'll go to planning. When you're done, to implementation, evaluation, and then once you have put your description for the 4 steps, you'll be able to submit. So maybe while we are still on this page, here are just the color codes that we are using for different domains. And then entries by status, here it shows the entries that you have submitted and the status of those entries. For example, you have submitted this one with a gray color, which is domain 1, and then the status is submitted for compliance. It means maybe it's waiting for the release date. and then the status of domain domain 2, it says submitted for moderation. It means the entry is waiting for the moderator to moderate, and then from there it will go to the next step. So you can track the status of your submitted entries here. And then the last the last is entries by outcome. So here it will indicate how many entries are successful, how many entries are not successful. And then when it says not available, it means the results are not yet released. So just take note of those terminologies. And then here under my submission, that's where I said you will see all the entries that you have submitted. And when you go to the CPD cycle, I said you'll be able to see the 4 step of a CPD. And then this is an example when you click on step 1 reflection, then you will see more information on that. And then under domain and competencies, you'll also be able to see the domains. When you click on public health, it will give you all the domains under that. So that is important for you to note in order to enjoy using the CPD platform. And then once you are done submitting your portfolio of evidence, before the entry can go for tutor verification, the system will request you to submit your entry for plagiarism or similarity check. So that's where we're going to talk about plagiarism detection system for intern portfolio of evidence entries. So what is happening here is that each portfolio of evidence entry submitted by the intern will be subjected to plagiarism detection prior to submission for tutor verification, and the system will check for similarity between portfolio of evidence entries submitted by the current interns against the existing database of portfolio of evidence entries submitted by the current and the past interns. And tutors have view-only access to report without the ability to modify or exclude matches. So that's what will happen. Each of your entry will have to go through plagiarism detection. And then this is the process for submission of portfolio of evidence entry for plagiarism detection. So what is happening is when you are at step 4, that is the evaluation step, that's where you will be requested to submit your entry for plagiarism. And the entry, so at the evaluation step, that's where you will save and submit for similarity check, and then you will be requested to accept the Turnitin EULA. So you have to accept, otherwise you won't move to the next step, meaning you have to agree or select yes. And then from there you will submit for similarity check, and then submission will be confirmed. There will be a similarity report generated. Then you will be able to review the report results. And if the similarity score is greater than 20%, you will be expected to rework your entry and make a new submission for similarity check, because the maximum acceptable similarity score is 20%. So please take note of that. Any score above 20 or above, please go back and look at your work and make a new submission. And then once you are happy with your report, you can submit, you can accept the report and submit for tutor to do the verification, and that is the end. So the system, maybe let me mention this. The system is currently being under maintenance. So once it is up and running, you will be notified and you will start using it. And that shouldn't prevent you from submitting your entries. For now, you can submit if you're done until the system is back in order. So yeah, that's what I just want to make you aware of. So here I'm just want to show you intern portfolio of evidence results. What you will see when the entry or the results are released, when you click on that particular entry that you have submitted that has been assessed, it will have a status that says submitted for compliance. This does not mean you are successful. Please make sure that you click on that submitted for compliance, and then you go to the assessment status. That's where you will see whether you are successful or unsuccessful, meaning all the entries, whether successful or unsuccessful, they have the submitted for compliance status. Please take note of that. And there is also a report there from the assessor. Please make sure that you open it, even if you are successful, because the assessor might be advising you on how to improve the quality of your submission for the other entries that you are still going to submit. Don't ignore it. Please open it and hear what the assessor is advising. And then if you are not yet successful, the status will change from submitted for compliance to awaiting submission. So this means that you need to make a new submission because you are not yet successful. And then there will be a report again from the assessor, which will be guiding you on areas where you need to do some corrections. The report will tell you whether you need to start a new activity altogether, or you can correct some areas in that particular activity. And in case you are, when you start to do your corrections, you're going to click here on reflection. That is the first step. And then you will address all the assessor's comments and move on to the next, just like that. And then when you are done, you're going to submit for plagiarism detection, and then for tutor to verify. And then here are some of the reasons that delay release from internship. We have touched on them: submitting portfolio of entries late, and then not being successful in 6 portfolio of evidence entries, failing the pre-registration examination, incomplete progress reports, and not having completed 365 days. So we're really urging you to submit your portfolio of evidence entries on time to avoid disappointments. And then intern portfolio of evidence queries. So interns must take responsibility of all portfolio of evidence-related matters, including submission of portfolio of evidence queries to SAPC. And please, no parent or family members should contact SAPC regarding portfolio of evidence-related matters on behalf of the intern. It is your responsibility as an intern regarding you as a professional. So please make sure that you take care of your own issues. And then reassessment of portfolio of evidence entries and appeal procedure. So the procedure is provided there in the intern and tutor manual on page 42. So please make sure that you go to the manual, familiarize yourself with the procedure that you are to follow in case you want your portfolio to be remarked or you want to submit an appeal. And there is a fee that comes with it. So please make sure that you take note of that, a fee of 326 rands. And then interns who want to have a consultation with an assessor or moderator, the procedure is also provided there. And it is important to realize that you can't request for a consultation when you have submitted an entry for the first time and you are not successful. Only after you have attempted the same entry twice, you can request for a consultation with an assessor or moderator to guide you. So please don't contact the office after the first attempt wherein you are not successful. And then unprofessional conduct, some of the actions that will be considered as unprofessional conduct, that is pressurizing an assessor or moderator to mark your portfolio of evidence entries, or threatening them or plagiarizing. So those are some of the unprofessional conducts that the office will not tolerate. And please note that unprofessional behavior will result in disciplinary action being taken against you as the intern. And then here I'm sharing the performance of interns in relation to the portfolio of evidence over a period of 3 years, that is 2023, 2024, and 2025. So if you can look at that graph, you will see that in 2023, this time of the year in January, we had 69% of interns being successful in 6 portfolio of evidence entries. And in 2024, there was a huge improvement from 69 to 80% pass rate, or the number of, 80% of interns being successful in 6 portfolio of evidence entries. And in 2025, it further improved to 84%. So we're just trying to encourage you to say and motivate you to say it's doable. And we're hoping that we're going to reach our target of 90% compliance rate in 2026 with you. So please don't let us down. We know you are capable and you're going to make it. And then important information, interns are expected to pay an annual fee of 737, and that should be done by the 1st of June each year. And you are also expected to complete 12 months. I've also touched on that. So please make sure that you take note of that and you comply with what is required. And then applying for community service. So this part is managed by the Department of Health via the ICP program, which is Intern and Community Service Placement Program. So this is the website that you will be using to apply for your community service. You will receive communication from your employer or from the Department of Health directly. And Pharmacy Council doesn't really have a major role there, except that we are providing them with the list of interns that are eligible for community service. So make sure that you meet all the requirements in order to secure yourself a placement for community service. And then this is how you will submit a request to the office via the online platform. So please make sure that you do that. And then lastly, we are also happy to announce that we will be hosting the 4th National Pharmacy Conference, which will take place from the 11th to the 13th of October 2026 in Durban ICC. And then the theme is also provided there. It glimpses into the future, advancing pharmacy towards 2050. And then early bird registration closes on the 31st May 2026. So we are really looking forward to see you there. And this brings us to the end of my presentation. I'm going to hand over to my colleague. We will do the question and answer session at the end of the next presentation. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I hope that you can see my screen and that you can hear me. If I can maybe just get a thumbs up if you can hear me.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, perfect. So good morning, everyone. My name is Dr. Yanda Joubert. and I am a moderator of portfolio of evidence entries for interns. And we will just quick outline of this presentation. We're going to talk about the competency standards, then we're going to look at the portfolio of evidence, assessment, how we do the assessment, then professionalism. We're going to talk a bit about confidentiality, and then a very important part, we're going to talk about the challenging competency standards and the guidelines for choices and evidence that you can make. This presentation workshop is mostly aimed at interns. There is a separate presentation for tutors, a workshop. One is tonight. So if your tutor wants to attend that, it would be really helpful for them as well. But these tutors can also learn here. So there's important resources that you can use during your internship. And firstly, very important, and Tabang did show you where to access that, is the 2026 Intern and Tutor Manual. And especially for portfolio of evidence, you must look at the criteria for assessment, which is pages 35 to 37. The checklist for the portfolio of evidence, page 41 and 42, and then the competency standards for pharmacists, which is right at the end, page 62 to 84. But please read through the whole manual and not just these pages, as they are very important information. All the submission deadlines, the exam dates, everything is in there. Other resources that you can use is consultation with your tutor. Remember, your tutor is there to guide you through this whole process. So the first person that you need to contact if you have any problems during your internship is your tutor. And if there's not open communication, then there might be problems. And then also you can use the SAPC website. There's a lot of information there that can help you in during this whole process that you're going to go through. So, sorry, some of the terminology that we use when we do portfolio of evidence is we talk about domains, competency standards, and then behavioral statements. Just excuse me. Okay, sorry about that. So we used to talk about the CPD, or the continuing professional development, and that you have to submit CPDs. But the CPD it's no longer the term that we use. We talk about portfolio of evidence. And you must do activities based on the domains and the competency standards. You compile your portfolio of evidence and you submit it on the CPD platform. So if we look at the competency framework, we have domain 2. So we have the big domain that says safe and rational use of medicines and medical devices. There are 6 domains. And then underneath each domain, there are certain competency standards. So, for example, in domain 2, we have patient consultation, we have patient counseling, and then we have the rest up to 2.8. Included here is pharmacist-initiated therapy, etc. And then underneath the competency standards, we have the behavioral statements. And these behavioral statements is what you need to be able to do to show us that you are competent and that you are successful and that you can practice on your own. So as I've said, there's 6 domains, and a domain is an organized cluster of competencies. So that is why there's different competency standards underneath the domains. We have public health, we have safe and rational use of medicines, supply of medicines, organizational and management skills, then professional and personal practice, and education, critical analysis, and research. So you will have to do 6 activities or select 6 competency standards and 1 from each domain. So the competency standards is developed for the South African context, and it forms part of a domain. what's also in there is that it tells you how the domain applied to you. There's an introduction, which is also very important to go through, the competencies, the behavioral statements, and then there's different levels of competency standards. There's the entry level, which is for interns specifically, and then your first 3 years of practice, you will be on the entry level. Then you have intermediate practice and advanced practice. So intermediate is between 3 and 7 years of practice, and then advanced practice is when you have been in the profession for more than 7 years. And then there's also an assessment tick box, and you must consider whether the evidence that you present show that you can do all of the behaviors. So make sure that you know how each competency standard is structured. So if we look at domain 2 again, so we have domain 2 at the top, then we have here we selected 2.6, which is the competency from domain 2, is pharmacist-initiated therapy, and then we have the behavioral statements underneath, A, B, C, and D. And you need to be, if you want to tick there, yes, you must make sure that you have addressed these behavioral statements. So in your manual, this is what you will see if you open up domain 2. You will see the heading at the top. Then you will see, does this domain apply to me? And then the introduction part, which, as I've said, is important that you read through that. Don't just skip the introduction and move straight to the competencies. Go through the introduction. There's a lot of really important information that you need to make sure that you can do that and understand. And then you have the different competencies as they are listed here. Okay, so let's quickly talk about continuing professional development. As I've said, we use the term portfolio of evidence, and with that we describe the activities that you are doing, because you are not yet considered as professionals. You have not finished your training. Remember, internship is part of your training. Although you graduate and you will get your degree this year, you are still busy with training. So undergraduate students and interns, they do a portfolio of evidence. Once you register as a pharmacist next year, you will do continuing professional development. We as pharmacists must do CPDs to show compliance, and you submit a portfolio of evidence on the CPD platform to show that you are competent and that you have mastered all the skills. So CPD is a cyclical activity, and it's a process by which a registered person maintain and enhance your competence throughout your professional career. So you will do CPDs for the rest of your career when you are registered as a pharmacist and you are active as a pharmacist. It usually encompasses a range of activities, including continuing education as well as supplementary training. And this will enable you to develop in your area of practice and to show competence or demonstrate competence. So if we just quickly look at the cycle, and this is the same for interns, for students, and for pharmacists, there are 4 steps: reflection, planning, implementation, and an evaluation. So the assessment of the phases of the CPD cycle is done mostly on a scale of 0 to 3. And to earn 3 marks, you must meet all requirements, and we will look at that when we talk about the criteria for assessment. And for all the 4 phases, the criteria for assessment is outlined in your manual. We have set page 35 to 37. And in addition to that, you must have used an appropriately professional communication style. So try not to make any spelling or grammatical errors. I know we are all human and we do make mistakes, but at least read through and make sure that there's minimal errors or no errors. Properly punctuate your sentences, and if you use If you talk about trade names, like medicine, make sure that the trade names are capitalized. When you submit online, it is not auto-corrected, so therefore you need to check everything. I always say type it in Word where you can do a spelling and a grammar check, and then you can copy and paste into the cycle. So if we look at the scale from 0 to 3, 0 would be not yet met. 1, you will get 1 if it's partially met. If it's met, you will get a 2, and fully met if you address all the requirements, then you will get a fully met. So as I've said, look at the manual, page 35 to 37, for the full details on how the marks are allocated. And take note that we have updated the 2026 version, so it is more clear as to what you need to provide to be able to get a fully met mark. So let's start with step 1, which is the reflection and the learning. We're going to first look at the learning title. So in the reflection, when you get to step 1, you must first decide on a learning title. And once you've done that, then the learning need follows. So decide on an appropriate title. This title must be relevant to what you want to learn, and it must be related to the competency standard that you have chosen. If I read the title, I must clearly and immediately know what are you going to do. It's like if you take a textbook from the shelf, or any book for that matter. If you take a recipe book, you want to see recipes inside and not how to care for your garden. So it must be related. It should describe what you're intending to do. And please, you should not copy the wording of the competency standard. Then you will get a 0, because then it is not original and related to what you want to do. And the learning title must be unique, and it must describe your case that you are going to address. So once you have a learning title, then we move to the learning need. So if we go to the learning need, you must ask yourself what there is that you need to learn. In other words, your own learning need, not the learning need of the patient or the colleagues in the pharmacy. And then you must ask, what does I need to, or does this what I need to learn relate to the competency standard that I've chosen? If you need to learn how to do compounding, but you have selected pharmacist-initiated therapy, then it's not related. So then you know you must select a different competency standards. And how do I know that is what I need to learn? So there should be a trigger. So what happened that made me realize that I need to learn this specific skill? And then what do you hope to achieve after completing this learning need? So if you have selected 2.6, which is pharmacist-initiated therapy, and your trigger was that the patient came to the pharmacy and requested some medication over the counter for nausea and vomiting, and you were not sure how to help them, then you have a trigger, because that's the scenario that happened. And then I need to learn how to conduct pharmacist-initiated therapy. There's your learning need. And once I have done this activity, I hope to be able to help or to help patients with all kinds of treatment that I can give over the counter, or conditions that require OTC medication. So you will then need to describe your learning need. You must make it personal. Talk about remember it is your learning need. As I've said, do not describe the learning need of others. And very important, the learning need must also be related to the selected competency standard. So the competency standard, if selected, this it will determine the choice and then also the behavioral statements, because every competency standard have different behavioral statements. So it will influence this directly. Okay, let's look at the assessment criteria, and we're only going to show the one for reflection because they all follow the same pattern. And you can look at that in your manual on page 35 to 37. So this is the assessment criteria for reflection. So here you see the learning title. If it's a direct copy, similar to the competency standard, behavioral statements, or the title is not appropriate or not related, then you will get a 0, and you get a 1 if it's original, descriptive, and related. And then if we just look at the learning need, in order to get 3, you must have a clear learning need according to the competency standard and a trigger scenario provided. In other words, what happened that triggered the learning need. And you must give an indication of what you hope to achieve after completing this competency standard. So you will see we used ands or ors to differentiate between if you will get a 0, there's an irrelevant learning need, or it is not linked to the competency standard, or it's not the learning need of the intern. So then you will get a 0. So please familiarize yourself with the assessment criteria that is available in the manual, as it is very important. Then along with that, we also have a checklist. So again, I'm only going to show the checklist for the reflection part, and that is available on page 41 of your manual. So this is just for you to check that you have included that there is a title, it is short, specific, and related, is concise statement in your own words. And then again, what you need to learn, your learning need in the first person, how did you identify this learning need, and not just say that it's an outcome, that you need to submit a portfolio of evidence, and because that's not really valid while you're doing this. And did you make sure that you did not include any details of planning and implementation? In other words, what you want to do and what you did in the reflection. If we move to step 2, which is the planning, it is important that you don't only describe how you plan to proceed, but you must say what are you going to do, how are you going to do it, why are you going to do things this way, as well as when you are going to do it. Again, refer to the assessment criteria and the checklist for the planning phase. So how exactly am I going to learn this? How am I going to learn how to provide pharmacist-initiated therapy? What do I need to do? So remember, if you plan something, it is something that will still happen. So it must be in the future tense. You must refer to the behavioral statements, and you must structure your planning to link it to 75% or above of the behavioral statements. And you need to provide specific details of the resources that you want to use linked to the behavioral statements. So you don't just say, I'm going to read the GPP, or you're going to read the complete GPP, which part, which section of the GPP, which part of the SNF, which part of a website. So you must be specific with the resources that you're going to use. And then you must include the reason why you use this resource, and think about the evidence that you can submit to support your learning activity. If you say in your planning, you're going to consult the GPP section 2.18, then typically in your evidence, when we get to evidence, you will know your evidence, you must show us that GPP 2.18 and how you have used that. So in the planning step, when you capture it online, you must also here select your primary learning trigger and the activity. And as I've said, put that checklist next to you when you are doing your your portfolio of evidence. Then you know you will be successful. Then we move on to step 3, which is the implementation. And here you need to describe what you did. And remember now you did do compounding, or you did evaluate prescriptions, and now it is in the past tense. Again, you need to provide the context. What did you do? When did you do it? Where did you do it? And how did you do it? And then you need to make reference to your evidence in the implementation description. So where the reflection had the learning title and the learning need, the implementation step have the description, what did you do, as well as the evidence that needs to be uploaded there. So you need to refer to your evidence in the implementation description. We will show you an example later on how you can do that, or how you can type that. And you should also make links to the behavioral statements of the chosen competency standard, and at least 75% of them. So evidence we will talk about in a short while. Then the fourth step is the evaluation. And it's important that your evaluation is written in the future tense. You should also say what you have learned, and it should be related to the evidence. Or is it related to, ask yourself if it's related to the evidence, but not what you did. You should not type here what you did. That was implementation. Then you should provide application. So how have you subsequently used your new required knowledge or skills? And you must give a practical or an actual example. And you need to provide a specific example to substantiate this. You don't need to provide evidence for this, but you need to tell us how you did that. If you did competence standard 1.1 promotion of health and wellness, and you you had a campaign about hypertension awareness and how someone should limit or change their diet, and how to have a healthy lifestyle, follow a healthy lifestyle, then remember the skill is what you wanted to learn. So then your application cannot be 2 days later, a patient, while I dispensed, I gave information to a patient on hypertension. That was not the purpose. The purpose was the campaign, the public health. So I was able to participate in a diabetic screening campaign, would then be a better example. How did this new knowledge or skills change the way you practice? So what was the impact? And then what could be a future learning need related to the domain that you have selected? So if you gave, let's go back to the pharmacist-initiated therapy example. If you were able to help someone out that complained about nausea and vomiting, then your future learning need cannot be, I want to be able to advise someone or provide treatment for someone with flu. Then it should be something different. I would like to participate in a therapeutic review of a patient prescription. So something else than what you have done just now. And again, look at the criteria and the checklist. So for your portfolio of evidence, each phase of the cycle must be completed. You must go through the whole process, all 4 steps, before you can continue. And doing your portfolio of evidence is a stepwise approach. It's important that you will not be able to start with the cycle if you have not done your annual declaration. So you complete your annual declaration first, Then you select a domain, a competency standard, read through the behavioral statements to make sure that you will be able to do this. Then start with your cycle. Then you need to submit it online where your tutor will verify online. So the tutor will get a message that say, your intern with name and PIN number have submitted a portfolio of evidence entry online and you need to verify that. And then if the tutor verifies, then you can either say, okay, I'm fine with this and submits it online, or you can return it back if you need to fix something. And it gets assessed, maybe moderated, and then you need to check for feedback. It is important if you select the domain that you focus on the relevance of that to your practice setting. As an intern, you should do all 6 domains. Once you are a practicing pharmacist and not an intern anymore, then maybe you will do more CPDs in domain 6, which is research, than you do in, so for example, domain 1. So you must focus on the relevance to your practice setting. As I've said, the cycle has 4 steps, and make sure that your tutor has verified and submitted your entries by the published deadline. So that is why the manual is important with those deadlines. Put it on your phone as a reminder or on your calendar where you can see it and make sure that you are on time and on track, and talk to your tutor and ask for guidance and tell them that you want to submit and that they need to check. I also have academic interns, and I usually check go through their whole activity before they even submit, because it just makes it so much easier. If I have to go through it and send it back and they have to change it, it takes some time. So if your tutor you can ask your tutor to check before you start the process, then it will be so much easier. So once you have chosen a competency standard, you must check again that it is appropriate for your practice setting, read all the behavioral statements, decide on the appropriate and sufficient evidence, and then follow through with the whole process. So as you complete each phase, make sure what you write is relevant to the chosen competency standard. And again, so you will see this is very important. It's on every slide. Refer to the checklist. So, as you know, you need to submit 6 portfolio of evidence entries. You must select 1 from each domain. You must be successful in all 6 of these entries. And please do not submit all 6 at once. Rather do 2 and get feedback and see if you are on the right track than when you submit all 6 and maybe it happened that you are not successful in any of them. Then you have to redo them and then you will have to pay the penalty fee. So it will increase your chances of success if you just start with 2 or 3 and get feedback on them and see where you can improve. And as Tabang said in her presentation, you will get feedback, read through the feedback, even if you are successful, because maybe there are certain aspects that you can improve on. So for each domain, you must choose 1 competency standard. Read through all the behavioral statements carefully. If there's 1 to 3 behavioral statements, so 1, 2, or 3, then you need to provide evidence for all of the behavioral statements. If there are 4 or more behavioral statements, then you need to provide evidence for at least 75% of it. So it's important to consult your manual for the details of the behavioral statements. And I always say aim for more. If there's 4 behavioral statements, aim to do all 4. Aim to address all 4. Because it might happen that some of your evidence is not accepted for a specific behavioral statement, but then you still have sufficient because you have still addressed 75% of the behavioral statements. And it's very important that every portfolio of evidence entry must reflect your individual work, because it is your journey and it is you that need to show that you have grown and that you have mastered these skills. So please, no group activities are acceptable. You will not be successful. Um, so you need to plan your activities well in advance, so that you can meet the deadlines that is set in the manual. So let's talk about, we're going to move to evidence. Evidence is very important because the evidence carry the biggest weight of all the parts of the cycle. So if you are not, if you get a 0 for your evidence, you will automatically not be successful with your activity. So the criteria for the evidence, it must be annotated. We're going to look at all of these aspects in the subsequent slides. So it must be annotated, must be current, valid, authentic, and sufficient. So let's start with annotated. So what do we mean with annotated? With annotation, you give a story or you give a meaning to the evidence that you have provided. It should be easy to read or legible. It should justify why the evidence is included. Your annotation must be planned and meaningful, and it must provide links to the behavioral statements. So it is not just a label or a single word or a scribble. It must tell a story. And that story that it tells is, what have I done to show behavior? So let's look at an example. In this case, we have a date. So we have an annotation with no value on the right-hand side. We have there the date, and then the annotation, this is the date of the prescription. So what does that tell me? Not much. But if you look at the meaningful annotation, we have the date again, and then for the prescription to be valid, it must be presented for dispensing within 1 month after it was written. This prescription is thus valid. So you see, it gives more meaning to why the date is important than just to tell me that it is the date of the prescription. So this is another example of evidence, and this is for Competency Standard 3.2, Supply Chain Management. I think it's behavioral statement E. So we have an invoice. So you can see there's pharmacy name and address, medicines ordered, batch number, expiry date. There's a date, account number, but it doesn't say much. Okay, so this doesn't really tell me anything. So how would we annotate this better? So do you think this annotation is good? We say invoice from the supplier, product order, quantity received, batch number, expiry date. The medicine was stored after it was received. Is this really a good? It's better, but it's not 100% there. If we look at this one, so here you can see we say it is Competence Standard 3.2E, the end phase of the procurement of medicine. We say that I have checked the name of the pharmacy on the parcel to confirm that it is for my pharmacy. I checked the medicine name, strength, pack size, and price. Batch number, why is the batch number important? I compared the batch number with the batch number on the parcel. Sure that it's the same. It's important for batch traceability. Expiry date, the same. I use it to pack the medicine on the shelf according to FIFO principles. And then you say, yeah, it was received in good order. It was not damaged or short dated. It was captured onto the system on the shelf below 25 degrees Celsius in alphabetical order. So you see here is the complete annotation. So you can see annotation is more than just labeling. Whereas in the previous one, I just labeled the batch number and the expiry date. Here we have annotation that tells the story and what you have done. What did you do with the batch number? Why is it important? What did you do with the expiry date? Why is it important? So it tells a story. So this is annotation of evidence. The next criteria is your evidence must be current. So it must relate to exposure to the competency standard during your internship period. So therefore, it must be collected during your internship years. If you have started to work in December, but you only registered in January, then you cannot use evidence that you have collected in December. It must be after you have registered. So you should also not include evidence from your undergraduate years. If you want to refer to a textbook that you used in university, that's fine, but you cannot use, if you worked in a clinic where you had provided or participated in a campaign, you cannot use that activity for your portfolio of evidence. It must be something that happened during your internship years. So the third one is your evidence must be valid. So it means that it must pertain to the specific competency that is being addressed. The resources that you use should be recent or the most up to date. It is advisable that you rather use updated legislation than referring to a part of the GPP, because some sections of the GPP is still outdated. So it's better to look at legislation. There are aspects in the GPP that's fine that you can use. For example, the consultation area or the compounding area in the pharmacy, it is fine. But if you look at scope of practice or aspects of that, then it's better to look at legislation. And on the SAPC website, there is the most recent and up-to-date legislation. So, as I've said, for scope of practice, rather refer to the board notice 4733 than the GPP. If you make a factual or calculation error in your evidence, then your evidence is not valid. And if it's not valid, then you will not be successful. So make sure that you do not make any calculation errors. As I said, it should be factually and correct evidence. If you say the competency is about how to fry an egg, but your evidence show me how crispy the bacon is, then I still don't know how to fry an egg. So it's of no value, so it's not valid. So then you will not be successful. So make sure that your evidence is valid for what you want to do and it addresses what you want to do. Then the fourth criteria is should be authentic. So authentic means that it should be your own work. It should not be fabricated and definitely not AI generated. For example, you suddenly there's new evidence that appear on the resubmission, or you have reworked it. So, for example, you have had a campaign, and now the assessor make the comment that there's no attendance register or there's no feedback, and suddenly on the resubmission now here appears the attendance register, and suddenly there are feedback forms for the same activity that was submitted 6 months ago. So do not do that, rather than start over. So make sure that your evidence is authenticated. You can ask the tutor to sign it, put his name, designation, P number, and the date. You can also sign. You should also sign your evidence. If you are an academic intern or an intern in manufacturing, make sure that the evidence is signed by the supervisor where you are doing your hours, or where you have, or the facility where you collected the evidence. Make sure that that supervisor sign, and then your tutor can co-sign. So that is how you authenticate your evidence. And then the last criteria is that your evidence should be sufficient. So as I've said before, if there are 4 or more behavioral statements, then the evidence that you submit must cover at least 75% of the behavioral statements. So if there's 4 behavioral statements, then at least 3 pieces of evidence. So make sure that you have enough evidence. And important, focus on the quality of the evidence and not on the quantity of the evidence. Please also do not use the same piece of evidence for more than one competency standard. In other words, don't use the same prescription to do competency standard 3.4, where you evaluate the prescription and then you use the same prescription for 5.3, which is ethical and legal practice. So there's more than enough evidence available in the pharmacy that you can get different evidence. I mean, obviously, legislation you will use DPP. So the resources that you use might be the same, but the actual evidence, the prescription, the compounding, the counseling, etc., that should be unique. And then also do not submit the entire legislative document. Don't give us the entire Pharmacy Act, just the sections or the parts that is applicable to what you have to, what you did. And if you are in manufacturing, make sure that you do not add evidence that may have clauses for intellectual property, and then rather select something else to do. Okay, so that is the evidence. And now we are quickly going to do a poll. Council will post the link in the chat, so you can click on the poll. And the question there is, if you choose a competency standard that has 8 behavioral statements, and you need to supply evidence for at least 75% of the behavioral statements, how many pieces of evidence do you need? So maybe we can just quickly look at that. I cannot see the poll answers. Click there and see what happens. So you need to select, and then there we can see. We only have 3 responses so far. It said 6. There we go. Okay, so yes, you all think 6 pieces of evidence. So yes, that is important that you have sufficient evidence to cover 75% of the behavioral statements. I'm going to go back to sharing my screen. I don't know what's going on. Let's just stop. I just want to share again. Nothing want to happen. I was like, there we go. Just need to go to where we were. Sorry about this, guys. So yes, if you have 8 behavioral statements, then you will need to provide evidence for 6 of the behavioral statements. Okay, so now we have time for a quick coffee break or comfort break. So for a 10-minute break, and then we will continue with evidence, and then my colleague, Mr. Ibrahim Hussein, will take over from me. So a quick break, and then we will be back at 5 to 11.
Morning. I just want to check if I'm audible.
Yes, we can hear you.
Good morning, colleagues, pharmacy interns for 2026 and tutors. We're going to continue with the presentation with a discussion on evidence submission. Put yourself in the assessor's shoes before submitting evidence. He or she was not with you when you compile this evidence. So annotate the particular piece of evidence to show which behavioral statement it is satisfying, and explain in your annotation exactly how that piece of evidence is satisfying that behavioral statement. Imagine you are holding up that piece of evidence and presenting it to the assessor in person. What would you say to describe that piece of evidence? If you're using photos, it must identify who you are. The assessors do not know you. Also maintain patient confidentiality. Photos must be date stamped to show the evidence is current, that it was done in your internship year. If you include pages from reference books and legislation or acts, it must have the reference name, the edition, the page number, etc. Just pages of reference materials or acts and legislation with no annotation does not show which excerpt you're referring to and seeking to apply. With regards to delivery notes, signatures without annotation is meaningless. How will the assessor know your signature or your supervisor's signature if you do not add the person's name, surname, and P number next to the signature? In the same vein, if you just have a cover letter stating that you were supervised and the actual document, which is the script, the delivery note, the invoice, has no evidence of submission, is that legal? Is that good evidence? If you're using electronic evidence, please provide the website name, the URL, the publication, the access date, the page number, etc. Evidence should follow a logical order. It should not be uploaded upside down. Evidence should be in one document. No unclear photos or blur screenshots of evidence. It goes without saying, unclear and illegible evidence cannot be assessed. Again, I want to reiterate, the assessor does not know you. Identify your own signature with a P number, the name, and your title, pharmacy intern, pharmacy supervisor, and of the person supervising you. Remember, annotate, annotate, annotate. Link your evidence to a specific behavioral statement and explain how that evidence satisfies that behavioral statement. Let's look at different scenarios. What type of evidence could you submit? Okay. If you're dispensing a script and providing information to a patient, evidence would be the script, obviously. And what other pieces of evidence can you add? References to show what makes the script legal, resources to show indications, dosages, potential side effects, contraindications, etc. When providing information to a group, the attendance register should mention the presenter's name, date, and venue. Ideally, one presenter. No group work with other interns are allowed. You should also include the presentation and reference material used to develop the presentation. For feedback on the presentation, the feedback should reflect knowledge and understanding of the audience after the presentation in terms of the content you presented on. The feedback shouldn't be a rating of the presenter where you say, I spoke with a good tone and voice projection, had good body language, etc. We need to know what knowledge was transferred to that audience. Remember to annotate your evidence and link it to the behavioral statements. If consulting a patient, then you would look at patient history, the prescription, any requests from the patient, blue patient copy if you're doing pharmacist-initiated therapy, the label, and the reference material used. If you're consulting a doctor, you will indicate the reason for consulting, noting the telephone number of the doctor and the time of the conversation on the prescription and reference material used to advise the doctor. Remember, references must be scientific, not the Wikipedia. and it must include the reference document name, page number, and edition. The evidence must also be annotated. It must show in the reference document what you're referring to, or if you're using evidence for conducting an activity, explain what you did and link it to the behavioral statements. If you're working with data, don't include pages and pages of raw data. Mention the reason for the data collection, include a screening report and data analysis to clearly indicate what you're seeking to show with that data. Okay, we're going to go with a re-emphasis on the evidence checklist. Please note your submission either syncs or swims with the submission of evidence. If you're not yet competent for the evidence, you're not yet competent for the entire POE submission. It must cover at least 75% of the behavioral statements. It must be annotated to clearly show why you included that piece of evidence and which behavioral statements it is satisfying. It must be clear and legible, and there must be no breach of patient confidentiality. The evidence must be proof of what you did. It is not merely just reading an article or a presentation of a theoretical scenario or witnessing somebody else doing an activity. You must convince the assessor that you did the activity. Your evidence must be professional, it must be neat and clear, and your annotations must not be a note scribbled on the evidence. And the annotation should not block out the actual evidence that needs to be read or seen. Okay, now we're going to attempt poll 2, which deals with the trigger incident. We're going to look at an entry example for a portfolio of evidence. And the link will be shared. Okay, so from the results that we're seeing on the screen is 94 responses, and I see the majority of responses is for domain 2, which would suggest that the interns have to familiarize themselves with the domains and the competency standards. Okay, so if we go back to the structure of the competency standards, if we go back to the structure of the competency standard, we can see here from the trigger, which was I was asked to participate in a public health campaign. We can see that the appropriate domain is domain 1, public health, and the appropriate competency standard would be 1.1, promotion of health and wellness. And behavioral statement D deals with participating in a public health campaign. Remember, you must be able to achieve 75% of the behavioral statements, not just behavioral statement D. This competency standard is directed at public health information. Remember, talking to individual patients does not constitute a public health campaign. Okay, we move over to our next poll, which asks you to choose the most appropriate learning title for example, and the options are 1, participation in COVID-19 health campaign at Steve Biko Academic Hospital, 2, promotion of health and wellness, and 3, promotion of COVID-19. The link will be shared with you. You have to choose one of those options. From the results, we can see that most of the interns have got it correct. Okay, we now move on to our next poll, which is poll 4. And poll 4 is, which is the best learning need based on the competency standard? The options are 1, I needed to learn how to provide advice and participate in a public health campaign. 2, I needed to learn how to speak in public. And 3, I needed to learn how to teach. Okay, let's get back to the presentation. To guide you, let's look at an example of a POE entry. Uh, Acknowledgement, this content is out of date. It deals with COVID-19. This is by design rather than folly. This is just an example intended to show you how to complete an entry. So if we look at the learning title, which was Paul 3, Participation in COVID-19 Health Campaign at Steve Biko Academic Hospital. And remember, for your reflection text, you should have a trigger, your personal learning need clearly stated, and what you hope to achieve after addressing it. What triggered the learning need, which was Paul 1, my pharmacy manager asked me to participate in a COVID-19 health campaign, and I did not know what this entailed. And your learning need, which was Paul 4, I needed to learn how to provide advice and participate in a public health campaign. And lastly, what do I hope to achieve? I hope to be familiar with the steps required to plan and successfully participate in a public health campaign. Note that the learning need and what I hope to achieve aligns to the skill. And the skill here is participating in a public health campaign and not the actual public health campaign topic, which might be hypertension, diabetes, COVID. So it's only part of it to learn what you're presenting on, but the main skill here is participating in a public health campaign. So you can read the planning slide displayed. You have to advertise your campaign to attract your specific target audience for Competency 1.1. Remember, mention details of the resources and specific sections within those resources. Cross-link the resources with the behavioral statements in your planning text. Have a plan for at least 75% of the behavioral statements. Remember, when planning for behavioral statement D, an attendance register is not the only evidence. You need to submit other types of evidence, so plan for them. The other types might be feedback surveys, picture evidence of you delivering the health intervention to the audience, ensure patient confidentiality, a participation letter signed by the supervisor or the person giving you permission for the public health campaign, or any screening tool you might use. Remember to mention why you're using each resource in your planning text, and remember the planning text should be in the future tense. You can read the proposed implementation text that's provided here, but notice there's a resource mentioned for behavioral statement A, B, and C individually on the first how on that slide. Then using all of those resources, you developed a poster which contained information for behavioral statement A, B, and C. You cannot just make a statement, I participated in a public health campaign, and then add next to it behavioral statement A, B, and C. It's not showing us which resources you, or it's not linked to evidence. Remember to answer the questions, what, where, when, and how in your implementation text as it is in the slide, and cross-reference the attached evidence and the behavioral statements that you are writing about in your implementation text. For example, I did the screening using the screening tool, and then you have in brackets evidence F, which you are referring to your evidence, which seeks to satisfy behavioral statement 1.1D. Remember, you have to account for at least 75% of the behavioral statements. 4.5 we've done already, which was which pieces of evidence would you submit for this particular entry? And some of the possible evidence that you can look at is source documents with specific sections with annotations. Example, the GPP, you must write the chapter, the page number, and highlight the specific part of the resource you utilized. The tool you use to present could be a poster, a pamphlet, a PowerPoint presentation, the photo evidence of you providing the advice to the audience, the attendance register, screening tool if you used one, participation letter, advert used to attract your target audience. These are just examples. You can include more evidence. Remember, the evidence must cover at least 75% of the behavioral statements. Your evaluation must cover these 4 aspects. What was learned in terms of the skill learned, which is participating in a public health campaign and not the topic. So in your evaluation, you should try to highlight what you learned in terms of the skill rather than the topic, which was COVID-19. The impact this new skill had on your practice, a practical example of how you applied that skill and a future learning need discovered while conducting the portfolio of evidence. I just want to say in the earlier slide when we spoke about evaluation, I think there was an error that it was stated there that it must be in the future tense. The only thing that's in the future tense is the future learning need. All the others must be in the past tense. What you learned, how the learning influenced your practice and your application, your practical example of application. Only the future learning need will be in the future tense. Okay, so the next set of lines, we looked at feedback from assessors. It will be dated. You might have feedback on multiple submissions for one competency standard if you're not successful the first time. So that's why the date is very important. The feedback can be positive, stating that you are on the right track, or it might be negative, and it will highlight the shortcomings and reasons why you are found not yet competent. Remember, read the comments and heed the assessor or moderator's advice before resubmitting. Don't fabricate evidence retrospectively after the assessor comments. Even if an entry has been marked competent, in some instances, the assessor might give you advice for future entries. For example, some of your evidence was not very clear and difficult to read. The benefit of the doubt was afforded to you. In future submissions, ensure your evidence is clear and legible. Okay, an example of an assessor comment: you should express your future learning need in terms of the competency and not merely in terms of your specific activity. So what does this mean? For outcome 3.5, if you compounded a cream mixture, two creams mixed together, your future learning need cannot be compounding another cream mixture. You must learn how to compound another product, maybe a combination of a cream, powder, and a liquid mixture. Remember, there is a difference between the skill learned and your particular topic. If the skill is counseling and you learned how to counsel on enalapril for blood pressure, your future learning need can't be to counsel on Epilim for epilepsy. You learned the skill to counsel. Rather, your future learning need could be to learn how to undertake a patient consultation. With regards to resubmission, if you are not yet successful for your portfolio of evidence, you need to resubmit a new portfolio of evidence from the same domain that you were not successful in. See the intern tutor manual for the guidelines, the application procedure, and relevant timelines. Each resubmission is a standalone and is treated as a new submission. Do not copy the previous text. The assessor and the moderator can see the previous text. Make sure your text is changed to the new activity you are attempting and not describing the previous activity. Make sure you account for what you learned in your first attempt if it is applicable. You cannot submit for outcome 3.5 compounding twice, and in your second attempt in your reflection text, you have the same trigger and claim you know nothing about compounding after you have completed one portfolio of evidence entry on it already. To maximize your chance to be eligible to write the intern examination, submit early, submit regularly on a monthly basis, and don't assume that you will get through on your first attempt. To prevent the need for further resubmission, make sure to follow your assessor's recommendations and comments. Don't simply resubmit without attending to the reasons for the entry being deemed not yet successful. Don't retrospectively fabricate evidence after your assessor comments. Resubmitted portfolio of evidence entries are sent to the same assessor. Assessors can see your previous submissions and comments. Okay, in this slide, we're speaking about remarking. So we're moving away from resubmission and looking at remarking. The request must be submitted in writing within 1 month of getting your results. It has a non-refundable fee of 327 Rand, and you must have proof of payment, must accompany your application. It is a remark, so you need to submit the same POE entry unchanged. No amendments, additions, or corrections are permitted. Remember, the purpose is to review the original assessment only. Results will be released within 14 days after receipt of application and proof of payment. Portfolio of evidence submissions are more than just another hurdle. They're an opportunity for you to further develop your professionalism and practice. Please maintain professionalism, stay away from plagiarism, AI-generated content. Your POE entry must be your own work. If any irregularities are detected, it will be referred to the SAPC legal department. They have been interns in the past that have been referred to the legal department. There are penalties. Expect them to be severe. Expect them to be applied. The plagiarism software Turnitin was implemented in 2025. See your intern manual, page 31 to 32 for more information. With regards to confidentiality, maintain patient confidentiality. Your POE entry is assessed as not yet competent if the patient confidentiality is breached. This is a zero criteria. Make sure the name and other patient information, the file number, the ID number, the cell phone number is completely blocked and not identifiable. Confidentiality is for patients only and not for prescribers and hospitals and other facility details. If there are reasons why you cannot share documents from your facility, please do not attempt those competency standards. Choose one where you can get evidence for 75% of the behavioral statements. The next few slides are some tips to assist you in choosing an appropriate competency standard from each domain. The slideshow will be available on the website, and you can use it as a resource or a reference when considering which competency standard to choose from each domain. So the assessors and moderators who have a wealth of experience in assessing and moderating entries obtained over many years of assessing and moderating POE entries, and also with assistance with statistics of submissions versus successful entries for various competency standards obtained over many years, have developed this decision-making aid. Firstly, make sure that your chosen competency standard is appropriate for your practice setting. Normally in life, you are challenged to think out of the box. But for your POE entries, please stay firmly and squarely in the box. You must be able to satisfy the behavioral statements for your chosen competency standard. Literal rather than too much of lateral thinking is needed here. So we flag the competency standard as either recommended, okay? If it is recommended, it's a good choice and should present no problems for the intern. To borrow a phrase from the Hunger Games, the odds will be in your favor. For possible, consider very carefully. Only choose if you are able to collect valid and sufficient evidence. The obtaining of evidence is not as straightforward as it might seem. And then for challenging, avoid. It will be extremely difficult to complete with sufficient evidence. Very few interns, if any, have been successful over the years attempting these competency standards. Okay, so now we'll just go briefly. As I said, it will be a resource. You can go back to this presentation if you choose a competency standard, and you can see what the assessors and moderators has rated that particular competency standard. So I'll just go through a few and not all of them. Domain 1, competency standard 1.1. The example we discussed earlier is recommended, as all interns from all sectors should be able to participate in a public health campaign. Competency 1.2 is challenging, more specific to institutional settings. It's only applicable for active participation in the pharmaceutical therapeutic committee meeting, not just proof of attendance. What did you prepare and present at this meeting? That's behavioral statement A. Behavioral statement B looks at active participation in antimicrobial stewardship. Behavioral statement C is actively applying, not just reading, of palliative care principles for patients with life-threatening conditions. There are other behavioral statements. You can read them under competency 1.2, and that's why they're regarded as being challenging. With regards to domain 2, competency 2.2 is recommended patient counseling, but make sure you submit enough evidence to cover 75% of the behavioral statements. Competency 2.5, therapeutic outcome monitoring is possible, but make sure you understand the scope of therapeutic outcome monitoring. Read the behavioral statement carefully. Make sure you can show how you applied it. Competency standards 2.6 is recommended pharmacist-initiated therapy and can be done in a retail or community pharmacy setting, but not in a public institutional setting. With regards to domain 3, 3.1 is possible only for interns in the manufacturing sector. 3.5 deals with extemporaneous compounding and can be done in institutional and community pharmacy sectors. 3.3 is challenging. Interns are not normally involved in formulary development. Domain 4, 4.6 is recommended, but you must differentiate between policies and SOPs and show application of both. It's applicable to all practice settings. Domain 5, there's no choice for this domain. All interns have to do 5.3. It is compulsory. It is ethical and legal practice. And domain 6, 6.2 is recommended and can be used for training pharmacist assistants in the workplace as per their scope of practice. 6.3 is possible, but it's only applicable to formal training of undergraduate pharmacy students, so it's best suited to academic interns. So some guidelines pertaining to some of the evidence you might need for selectors' competency standards from each domain. These slides are included as a resource to be consulted before you start your entries. The emphasis is on some here. It just shows some possible evidence to point you in the right direction is provided. This is just a guide to point you in the right direction and does not in any way get you 75% of the behavioral statements. So I just want to reiterate that this is just some possible evidence. It's not all the possible evidence that will get you 75% of the behavioral statements. Again, we're going to go through the domains. So domain 1, we have discussed possible evidence for competency standard 1.1 in the example presented earlier. For competency standard 1.6, you need a screening tool. With regard to domain 2, some possible evidence for competency standard 2.2 is the counseling plan. Make sure you tailor-made it to the patient's needs, the patient feedback on understanding, the tutor statement, resources used for counseling skills needed, and an activity to show how it was applied. With regards to competency standard 3, some possible evidence for competency standard 3.1 include quality assurance documents. Important, be aware of intellectual property concerns in manufacturing sites. If you are not allowed to share the documents, please choose another competency standard. For domain 4, for competency standard 4.4, it deals with the process of updating an SOP. You must show how you as an intern was actively involved and highlight your contribution to updating the SOP. It's not just typing it out for your tutor. Whereas 4.6 deals with evidence on how you applied an existing policy and SOP. Include the entire SOP. Have evidence that you applied most of the steps of the SOP, not just a small portion of the SOP. With regards to domain 5.3, it is compulsory, and it must include annotated extracts of the applicable acts, legislation, code of conduct, and evidence of how you applied it. Keeping abreast means using current and or recently amended legislation, and you have to have evidence that you applied that legislation. Remember, annotated current professional indemnity certificate, not just a current application for indemnity insurance. You must prove that you currently have professional indemnity insurance. And for this competency standard, you can include evidence for more than one activity to cover 75% of the behavioral statements. For competency standard 6.2, include evidence that training is part of an agreed plan and clarify the role of the more experienced colleague. Traditionally, interns found it difficult to identify the difference between a policy and an SOP for competency standard 4.6. If you look at page 40 of your intern manual for the definitions of a policy and an SOP, you will find those definitions there. Please familiarize yourself with the definitions. The GPP is not regarded as a policy for your practice setting. It is a reference book. On the slide is a list of some applicable policies. You can see the NDP, sanitation policy, health and safety policy, etc. Your practice setting should have more of these policies. For example, the leave policy or dress code policy. For behavioral statement A, you will have to show application of a policy. Okay, now we're on to the next poll, which seeks to see which common challenges have you experienced during your internship. I know that your internship has just started, but maybe you can share from just the beginning of your internship, which common challenges have you experienced during your internship? From the results that were written there, you can see it was limited time, juggling many tasks, workload, communication, getting evidence is some of the challenges being highlighted. Okay, so tutors from different provinces were invited to the SAPC Lahotla for assessors and moderators for 2025. They were tasked with contacting the interns and tutors from their various provinces to find out specific challenges encountered by the interns and tutors. The tutors highlighted these challenges they encountered with interns from last year, and this was from all the provinces, so it was nationwide. You can consult the slide later. I will mention just some of the intern challenges encountered. Some of them highlighted where the tutor said that the interns lack planning, lack of independent learning ability, insufficient preparation, non-independent thinking. With regards to skills, lack of communication and time management skills, lack of the ability to adapt and be creative. With regards to attitude, interns generally had a low morale. There was lack of enthusiasm and initiative and no or very little sense of responsibility. So these things are shared so that you can introspect and have a look at yourself and see, do you have any of these challenges or any of these characteristics or traits, or even during your internship year, if you experience any of this, know that you're not alone and other interns have also felt the similar things, but you have to brave through it and you have to manage it. You've come through a pharmacy degree where you studied and you write exams and there is pressures in terms of time management and workload and all of those things. Your internship year, remember, you're practicing, but you're still a student as well. So you're going to have to brave through all of these things and you would be able to be successful. The tutor challenges were discussed with the tutors in their workshop on the 6th of February. I just want to highlight the concern of the limited time allocated for verification. There are monthly deadlines to try to assist you to submit regularly. There are deadlines for the interns to submit, for the tutors to submit, for the assessors to assess, for the moderators to moderate, and then for SAPC to release the results. And all are needed to be fitted in 1 month, and then we rinse and repeat. So the next month is exactly the same. So everyone is working under limited time. I would suggest you speak about these timelines with your tutor and make your own independent timelines so that you can submit on time, so that the tutor assists you with your POE, your portfolio of evidence entry, rather than submitting multiple POE entries at once to your tutor and giving them just a few days to advise you after your submission deadline has passed. If the tutor finds the entry substandard and returns the entry to you, you have to wait for the next deadline to submit. This is critical for the deadlines before the exam dates. So please communicate with your tutors and try to sort things out before the intern deadline and before the tutor deadline. And finally, don't treat these portfolio of evidence submission as just another hurdle. Use this platform to learn, enrich your experiences, develop your skills and competencies, use it as a stepping stone to success, and become a true lifelong learner. You will be doing CPDs throughout your professional career. Okay, now I would just like you to please complete the attendance register survey.
Okay, thank you, Ibrahim. And this brings us to the end of this presentation. So we are going to take questions. Thank you.
While the interns complete the survey, if you have any questions, please post them in the Q&A section on Microsoft Teams. If you're joining us on YouTube, please post your questions in the comments. We will read them out. We have a couple of questions, Tabang. The first one, how does our tutor verify the entry? Is it also done on the SAPC website?
Thank you, Nat. Yes, the tutors do the verification of entries on the SAPC online platform. So once the intern has submitted it for verification, the tutor will have access to the entry to do the verification. Thank you.
If we are completing our internship at a manufacturing company and choose to do our 400 hours in community pharmacy, should we select community pharmacy under secondary area of practice for the annual declaration?
Lisbeth, are you there? Or Malalo, maybe could you please assist with that one?
Good morning. So this is just about the fourth National Pharmacy Conference that will be hosted in October, just to encourage yourselves as interns. I know you might think that it's not necessary, but it does help you to give you a broader perspective about best practices all around the world, because we'll have international speakers, yourselves as well. If you're in academia, you would probably hear from your tutors that you can submit what is the fancy word they use, those that are studying protocols and all of that, abstracts, right? So that is just the information that we're sharing, and further information is being communicated to those that were already registered. It is also available on the website. We'll also be sharing the same information with your tutors. And that is all regarding the fourth Pharmacy National Conference. It's quite big and exciting. Thank you.
Sorry, Mulalo, if you could assist with answering this question as well. If we are completing our internship at a manufacturing company and choose to do our 400 hours in community pharmacy, should we select community pharmacy under secondary area of practice for the annual declaration?
Natalie, please could you just repeat the question for me? I had parts of it.
If we are completing our internship at a manufacturing company and choose to do our 400 hours in community pharmacy, should we select community pharmacy under secondary area of practice for the annual declaration?
For the annual declaration, you can choose. It's not really going to be because you spend 400 hours there. Remember, the 400 hours is quite short, right? It's 8-hour day, 40 hours a week. So you could still not opt to select it. The declaration would still be able to allow you to proceed to finality.
Does compounding include compounding for ward and pharmacy stock? Does it have to be for a specific patient?
Thank you, Natalie. So okay. Okay,
Go ahead,
thank you.
Tabang.
Yes. So compounding, it really depends whether it's bulk or patient patient specific. Like in community sector, the compounding will be per prescription, meaning it will be for a particular patient. But in a hospital setting, you might find that a particular ward is using a particular item which has been prescribed for almost half of the patient in that ward. So in that case, you can compound in bulk since it will be used as a ward stock. So it just depends on the setting, but I will request the assessor as well to just add. Thank you.
Hi, Tabang, thank you for your answer. Sorry, I just had an issue with my mic. It is always better to have to do compounding for a specific patient. Then you can have the prescription as evidence. You can show the calculations that you did, and you can still show how you have addressed the behavioral statement. And for 3.5, there's only one behavioral statement that you must, and just quickly get to there. Apply pharmaceutical knowledge to the formulation and compounding of medicines. So as long as you can show us that, because that is what you need to do. But we have received a lot of entries that we interns did bulk compounding, which was successful. We also received entries where they did for a specific patient, which was also successful. So it is all about showing the pharmaceutical knowledge, applying that knowledge, and the way you annotate your evidence. I hope it answers your question.
Do we have to block out patient signatures on our evidence?
If you with a signature you can make out the patient's name and surname, yes. If it is really just a scribble and you can't make out anything, then no. But it is better to block it out. If you are not sure, block out the signature.
The email notifying us not to submit our POE as yet was submitted to us after some of us had submitted our first entry. Kindly clarify if this will be marked.
Thank you, Net. So we're encouraging the interns who registered this year not to submit their portfolio of evidence entries for assessment until they attend this workshop, so that they can get all the information they need in order to submit the good quality entries. So those interns who have submitted, unfortunately, the entries are going to be assessed and they will receive the results. Once it is submitted, we don't return the entries. Thank you.
Natalie, just to add, to give comfort, I mean, the outcome will come out as it is, but you do have an opportunity to resubmit without being penalized. So if you've already submitted, just to add on what Tabang said. Thank you.
How exactly do I make contact with my moderator after resubmissions? What steps do I take?
Thank you, Nat. So as part of my presentation, I indicated that there is a criteria that needs to be followed by interns in order to have a consultation with an assessor or moderator. And I also indicated that the criteria is also outlined in the manual. I think it's on page 42, if I'm not mistaken. So the intern should have attempted the same entry at least twice, wherein they are found not yet successful in both attempts. And then in that case, then the intern should contact the office and request to have a consultation with the assessor. So it is like that because we're expecting the intern to go through the assessor's comments after the results are released with the help of the tutor before they can request for the assessor's intervention. Most of the comments, the tutors are in a position to can help the interns to address them without really needing the assessor. So that's why we're giving the tutors an opportunity to intervene, and if it doesn't work, that's when the assessor will come in to clarify the comments. So the intern should look at page 43. There is under section K, consultation with assessor and moderator. That's where the criteria is outlined. Thank you.
Competency Standard 1.3 in the 2026 manual has 2 behavioral statements. In previous year manuals, there were more behavioral statements. I just want to make sure it's correct and that Competency Standard 1.3 should only have 2 behavioral statements.
Thank you, Natalie. Yes, I have now opened the previous, I saw that question, so I opened the manual for 26, 25, and 24, and in all of them, there's only 2 behavioral statements. So I think it is correct. There should just be 2. Thank you.
What evidence do you look for Competency Standard 3.5, since it is only 1 behavioral statement? I'm aware of the following evidence, GPP, pictures of myself compounding, but what else should we include, as there is not much to work with for this behavioral statement, and I know quality over quantity, but how many pages minimum should we have for this one?
Hello. Can you hear me? I can take that one.
Yes, Ibrahim, go ahead.
Yes, for Competency Standard 3.5, if you actually read the GPP section on compounding, it will alert you that you need your SOP from your practice setting. So the SOP is one. Obviously, you're going to have to label that particular product. So label requirements, you'll have to look at the legislation for label requirements. You're going to have to give it an expiry date. So you're going to have to look at legislation in terms of extemporaneous compounding and what does it say in terms of what expiry date you can allocate for it. The GPP again will speak about batch traceability. So you have to look at the batch manufacturing record. So that's why we say when it's just one behavioral statement, you still have to look at your resources. And if you read the GPP with intent, it will point to other things that you need in terms of that. So it's not just the GPP, it's the SOP, label requirements, expiry dates, batch manufacturing records. You can even look at it at the ingredients that you're using and saying, are they compatible to each other to be mixed together? You can look at resources for calculations in terms of how do you do a ratio calculation? How do you do a percentage calculation, or whatever the calculation is needed for your particular compounded product? So it all, again, depends on what you're compounding. And if you read your resources with intent, it will point you to more references and resources that you might need to include. Thank you.
Does this mean that the first CPD submission will be on the 23rd of February?
Yes, that is correct. Thank you.
Do we have to provide evidence for the trigger for our portfolio of evidence, or do we only mention what the trigger is?
Thanks, Natalie. Now, you don't need to provide evidence for that. We want to see the evidence for how you have done the activity. So you need to provide that evidence, not for the trigger. It's not necessary.
If you're working in a manufacturing pharmacy, how does the supervising pharmacist in a community pharmacy sign the 400-hour declaration?
Maybe I can take it. So on the system, the supervising pharmacist has been provided access to do what is necessary, which is then overseen and submitted by a tutor. So that is available on the platform that you are using to submit your entries, to include the 400 hours of supervised pharmacist function.
If we are doing domain 1 and an attendance register is needed as evidence, should we submit this or does the POPI Act apply? Do we need to obscure the names?
Thank you, Natalie. Yes, you need to obscure the names, and yes, you need to provide or show the attendance register. Remember, an attendance register don't only have the names and signatures of the patients or the audience on it who were present, but it should also have the name of the event or the session that was held, who was the presenter, where was it held, the date, the time, and then the names and the signatures. And yes, you should obscure those for patient confidentiality. And if you want to provide photos of that event, you also need to blur out the faces of the patients if you take the photo from where you are standing in front of the audience. If you take it from the back, it's better. Then you don't have to worry about the faces. Just make sure about other people walking around facing the camera. But yes, we needed an attendance register.
Are we permitted to locum as qualified post basics for extra income during the internship?
So during your internship year, you have two scopes. When you are at the pharmacy where you are registered, your scope of practice there is that of a pharmacist under direct supervision. However, when you are not in that facility and not in the facility you're doing your 400 hours if they are required and you are doing it purely for access to extra income, then you have access to the scope of practice of a pharmacy technician. So you can locum provided you do have the time and the means for it.
Could you please explain how to choose a new CPD following resubmission?
Thanks for the question. So if you need to do it over, if you need to resubmit and it was not just patient confidentiality, you have to start over. Then you start over. You can still do it in the same. You could still use the same competency standard, but something new. Don't try to fix it by adding suddenly a training plan or a patient consultation sheet or something. Address the comments and start over with something new. A patient that, it should be, it can still be in the same competency standard, but it should be a different trigger and a different scenario that you're going to use. So you don't need to select necessarily a different competency standard. I mean, there is only so many that is possible or that is recommended for you to do, unless we say that it is a difficult competency standard or it's challenging for interns. Then you can select a total different competency standard from that domain. But otherwise, you must just describe the new case that you're going to use, that you're going to do.
Is the 6-month period counted up to the practice exam or up to the actual exam? For example, if a person started in February, would they be eligible to write in August?
Counted up to the day that you're writing the actual exam. So if you are on the 6th month, on the day that you are writing the exam. So with the Feb, it will depend when in Feb you're registered. So if you registered at the beginning of Feb, definitely in August, you will be above your 6 months of internship. But if you register towards the end of March or towards the end of beginning of March, then it will depend on when the exam is, which is the first week of March, and still you would be able to write. So if you are calculating from the date of registration all the way to the third or the actual date of the exam, if you're only 6 months, then you meet the first level of criteria. If you're 9 months, then you meet the second level of criteria.
If we
Sorry,
fail-
Nat,
Yes, no,
please,
go ahead.
could you please just clarify that they would still need to be able to book before sitting for that exam? So they need to plan, according to the schedule, while meeting the first and second criteria. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. So when it comes to booking, how the system is set up is at the booking period, when the bookings are open, the system will automatically do an assessment, right? And if you look at the schedule of how the CPDs are released, so we say that the bookings will open 6 weeks before the exam is due. And the first 2 weeks when the bookings are open, the booking for the exam is free. So if you already met the criteria for booking for the exam, which means that if you're booking at your 6th month, that means that you must have submitted all 6 and just been competent in the first 3. Then you need to have met the criteria by then. Otherwise, usually the release of the CPDs will be before the late booking closes. So that means that you might have to wait. So if you've missed the deadline for the release of the CPDs, but you've already submitted and you're just waiting for them to be released, usually they'll be released at least a month before the exam, which means that you might have to wait for those results to be released and then you can book. So that is why you have to look at that schedule and look at the colors that indicate the danger zone for you to not be able to book for the exam. Also paying very particular attention to the verification date, because those 2 dates are important for the release of the results. You might have submitted in time, but then if they're not verified on time, you will not be able to get the results. So when you're doing your planning, especially for the ones that are now on the 9th month, it becomes even more important then, because if you miss that 9th month, then you're probably going to write after you have met all other criteria and are just waiting for the exam, which is then going to eat up on your time for you to be released from ComServe. So when you're planning, plan to try and submit as many CPDs as you can, so that if you have to resubmit, it's not that many, and then you are increasing your chances to qualify for the exam. Thank you.
If we fail the second pre-registration exam and need to retake it next year, but we completed the internship hours, must we still work as an intern next year and submit a portfolio of evidence again before sitting for the next exam?
And as Chavan had said, the exam is assessed on 4 pillars, right? The exam is just one of 4. So if you've met all other 3, meaning that you are successful in all 3, on all 6 CPDs, you've submitted all your progress reports, you've met your hours, and the only outstanding thing is the exam, then no, you don't have to continue being an intern. You can just wait for an exam. You can even access the scope of a PT while you're waiting for your examination. However, if you've only lapsed the 365 days and not having met all other criteria, being your progress reports or your CPDs, then you have to continue being registered as an intern with in an approved facility with a tutor for you to be able to submit all other things. So the exam, fortunately, can stand on its own without you having a tutor or a trained facility while you're waiting for it. But the progress reports and the CPDs, those ones need a verification from a tutor. So for that purpose, you would need to be registered as an intern, whether in that same facility or in a different facility, having to do a session of contract. Thank you.
If we include scope of practice for a pharmacist intern into our evidence, do we add a screenshot of board notice 4733 as seen on the SAPC website, or do we have to find it under the regulations relating to the practice of pharmacy? And how would this then be annotated?
Thank you for that question, Natalie. So you can download that board notice with the new scope, and then you annotate it that this is board notice, and you give the number, and you say it's amendment to the act, and whole thing of the act, and then you say, this is my scope of practice. So you just explained in there how you've used that document. So it is possible to download that board notice and use it, include it in your evidence, and then just annotated it that is how you used it. I hope it answers your question. Thank you.
If you are an academic intern, do you need to get permission to conduct a public health campaign from your tutor at the university or the supervisor of the pharmacy that you work in?
Thank you, Natalie. Well, it depends. If your public health campaign is going to be at the university, then your tutor. If you're going to do your public health campaign at the facility where you are going to work, then it should be the supervising pharmacist.
Our last question for the day. Regarding being locums, can all pharmacy interns locum provided they have time? As I recall, it was not allowed prior. Has this now changed?
All interns can locum, and the updated regulation that clarify the scope are on the website. So if you go into the SAPC website, you go to registered persons and you click on intern. The second tab there, which is scope of practice, you'll get the regulation that supports that. So if you're trying to locum and wherever you're trying to locum at, they are giving you challenges, you can just refer them to that scope. Also pertaining locums, please note that we will not be issuing you a specific letter or a specific certificate that says that you can locum. The registration and the regulation allow for it. So all that you need to support that is where I am directing you on the website. There's the person's intent, scope of practice. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, just to add on what Lisbeth has said, it is also important for the interns to understand the conditions of their internship, because I know some employers don't allow that. So maybe the intern is saying it based on what it's happening in his or her place of employment. So if it's not approved by the employer, then it's something else. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. We have gone over time, so no further questions.
Okay, thank you, Natalie. And I just want to take this opportunity to thank all the presenters for today and the colleagues from the office for all the assistance. We really appreciate your contributions towards making this workshop a success. And to our interns and tutors who managed to join us today, thank you so much for making time to be with us. And we wish you all the best with your journey. Remember, we are all here to give you all the support you need. Your tutors are the first point of contact. If maybe you can't get what you need from the tutor, please feel free to contact the office. We are always there to assist you. And with those words, I just want to wish you a blessed day and goodbye.
Goodbye, everyone.